Hi everyone.
Hello again.
We're continuing in Ray's book, In Search of Christian Freedom, the chapter Argumentation and Manipulation. The subheading is Recognizing Common Pitfalls of False Argumentation. He begins with two scriptures quoted. The first one, 1 Corinthians 14:20 from the NIV translation. Brothers, stop thinking like children. In regards to evil, be infants, but in your thinking, be adults. And then Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14 from the American translation. We must not be babies anymore, blown about and swung around by every wind of doctrine through the trickery of men with their ingenuity in inventing error. Then Ray says, there are honest and dishonest methods of argumentation, principled and unprincipled, genuine and artificial. We have already considered some of these, including the making of mere assertions, one-sided presentations, where contrary evidence is suppressed or ignored, use of ridicule toward those taking a contrary view, pontificating on the basis of claimed superior wisdom or superior authority. These are a few of the invalid methods used. Others include,
and then there's a series of bullets, misrepresentation of opposing arguments, as by the use of a straw man in the place of the real point at issue. Use of circular reasoning, in which an unproved premise is used as the starting point of an argument that proceeds to build on the premise rather than on established fact. False analogy, where similarities exist but not the kind needed to prove the conclusions argued for. Creation of a false dilemma, which makes it appear that there are only two choices, the one being argued for and another that is usually undesirable, when in fact there may be several choices, several alternatives. The dragging of a red herring over the trail of the argument, that is, bringing in some point that is not relevant to the discussion, and which only serves to divert the reader's attention from the weaknesses in the argument. Ad hominem, meaning in Latin, to the man argument, which consists of an attack on the person argued against instead of on his argument. Provincialism, that is, appealing to the tendency to identify closely with the thinking, belief, even the prejudices, bias, or ignorance of a particular group, and to see things largely from the standpoint of the in-group versus the out-group. And to that he has a footnote from a book, In Logic and Contemporary Rhetoric, by Howard Kahane of Bernard Baruch College, who said, quote, provincialism often results in a false conception of the importance and moral quality of one's own group. In its extreme form, the fallacy of provincialism turns into a worse vice, the fallacy of loyalty. This is the fallacy of believing or disbelieving in the face of great contrary evidence because of provincial loyalty. And the last bullet is misuse of deductive reasoning, either taking a broad principle and drawing unwarranted or unproved conclusions from it, or vice versa, using certain incidental facts and building on these to establish a broad principle that does not necessarily follow, hence a hasty generalization.
and now back to Ray. These kinds of argumentation often overlap or coalesce. The red herring may include an appeal to a provincial bias or consist of an ad hominem attack. But however employed, the use of these various forms of argumentation can frequently produce material that appears very plausible, sometimes even impressive, and yet it is false. Intricate, winding reasoning may leave the reader feeling perplexed, and he may simply decide that the writer is far more intelligent than he is, and that the material he finds confusing is actually very deep. Perplexity translates into profundity, and so that what is really superficial takes on the appearance of depth.
It was particularly as a result of governing body discussions that I came to realize how widespread the use of these methods of false argumentation was, how frequently they occurred in the various publications of the organization. Not that solid argumentation is completely absent, for that is not the case, but on crucial points, the teachings that create issues in the minds of many persons, I believe there is clear evidence that the Watchtower publications have employed artificial and all too often deceptive reasoning that manipulates the mind of the reader. This may not necessarily result from a conscious decision on the part of the writers. In many cases, it is perhaps born of a subconscious realization that the proof is not as strong as one might wish, that the counter-arguments are strong. The writer is not only trying to convince his readers, he is also, perhaps without realizing it, trying to convince himself.
The desire to be loyal to a particular teaching or position may cause the mind to develop reasoning that is not sound in order to shore up the position argued for. Belief that one is upholding the one and only true organization of God can serve to suppress or dull a sense of unease this might otherwise produce in him, and he may convince himself that the argument is valid. Regrettably, however, it is difficult to believe that all the flawed argumentation comes from such subconscious motivation. In some instances, at least, it appears deliberate, a case of intellectual dishonesty. An entire book could be filled with examples of the above kinds of fallacious argumentation, taken from the Watchtower publications. A small number are considered here. Next time.
That's next time, which is the subhead, attacking the person instead of the argument. Mm-hmm. That is the ad hominem argument.
Right.
But we wanted to link right now some of the ways in which the Watchtower not just follows oftentimes falls into these pitfalls of false argumentation, consciously or subconsciously, that is, perhaps accidentally, without malice, but also sometimes, as he says here, deliberately. But it's not just pitfalls of argumentation the Watchtower is habituated to. It is also certain ways of interpreting Scripture, and we've done some videos we want to put on your screen, links to right now, about what we call Humpty Dumpty hermeneutics.
Yes.
And another series we followed up with, that was called The History of Humpty, which is about, particularly about the fallacies of the way they argue about prophecy and interpret the Bible on prophecy.
Yeah.
So those two series are linked on your screen right now. And one of them, at least, is available in PDF, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So next time, attacking the person instead of the argument.